So welcome back. Today, we're going to have one of our longest lectures because we're going to have a very in-depth discussion about negotiation, a key skill for leaders who enter complex, uncertain, and volatile contexts. And so, for this lecture, we're going to identify different negotiation approaches. This will remind you a little bit of the styles and roles of leadership that we discussed earlier. We will then focus on the concept of principled negotiation, why it matters, how we can use it, and implement it on an assignment. So, the first thing, how many of you have seen a situation like this, where you go out to a local market and you try to negotiate for a price of something? I'd like to ask right now for 2 volunteers from your side, one who will be selling and one who will be buying. You can choose what it is that you want to sell, be it vegetables, fruits, clothes, electronics, whatever it is that you're used to negotiating with in your home country. Take some time, 3 to 5 minutes, play out or act what this negotiation would look like, and then come back. So, 2 brave volunteers to take on the leading role, do this and come back. So, who won? Which of the 2 parties won? The one buying or the one selling? And why? Why did they win? Is it because one of them got closer to the middle range of the price? Is it because one of them sold what they needed to sell or get what they needed to get? It's very different depending on how you look at it. Having considered this, I'd like you to take 5 to 10 minutes in your group to discuss how have you used negotiation in your work. Whether it is trying to negotiate your contract, some time off, a project outcome, a promotion, how have you used it in your work? Come back afterwards. Okay, so having discussed the times that you've negotiated at work, why do we negotiate? What's the point of negotiation? Well, if you ask me, it's this. The reason you negotiate is so that you can produce something better than the result you can obtain without negotiating. If I enter a negotiation and I know that I'm going to lose in all circumstances or get something less than what I could if I did not negotiate, I likely will not negotiate, right? So it has to be that negotiation brings out something better, either an improvement in relationship, an improvement in a project, or so on. Okay? Now, it's time to give a little bit of a try to this negotiation. Split into groups of 4. Your lecturer will provide each one of you with a role, and don't share it with the other ones. The objective of this task is for you to agree on a time and date for the next meeting. Okay? Remember, don't share your role, and good luck. Come back when you're done. Did you manage to arrange in a meeting, time and date? I'm pretty sure that some of you were a little bit more helpful than others. And that's why we were doing this exercise, to show you 4 different approaches to negotiation. An individualist approach, an altruist, a cooperator, and a competitor. All of you have these roles. So take 5 minutes, each of you, and together, to discuss from your role play. How would you describe these? And come back. So you should have seen that the individualist only cares about their needs. The altruist only cares about the needs of the others. The cooperator is trying to make things work together. And the competitor only wants to win. Even if it means losing his position, they want to win compared to the others. Right? Very different styles, very different uses for them. You should by now probably have a very good idea of which one would be most effective for a leader. But if you don't, think about it further. Okay? For now, though, what I want to ask you is which one of these roles would be most effective in a group? Which one of these was the most useful for making your groups work together? And did any of these have a risk of causing further conflict? I think you should know by the exercise which ones of these are pretty quick, right? So let's move on. We're going to go into principled negotiation. But why principled negotiation is important is perhaps best explained with this story of 2 sisters who arrived together from school one day, and they both want an after-school snack. They both get to the kitchen and see an orange, and immediately they both want it. Unfortunately, there's only one orange in the kitchen. And so they begin arguing. I want it because I saw it first. No, I want it because you had the last orange. No, I want it because. Their mother hears all of this ruckus, walks in and says, what's the problem? She says, I want the orange and she's taking it from me. I want the orange, she's taking it from me. And so the mother, in a very Solomonic way, grabs the orange, splits them in half. Each one of the sisters takes their half and walks off. The first sister, for a snack, takes her half of the orange to squeeze it and make some orange juice. The other sister takes the skin of the orange, the rind, to make a dessert for her. What happened there? They both got half of what they could have obtained, right? Because they did not go beyond their arguments. They did not go beyond their position of, I want an apple. I want an orange. I want an orange, right? If they had discussed this further of what they wanted to use the orange for, they might have walked out both with a fuller glass of juice and a bigger dessert. So principled negotiation focuses on this. It says that what we need to look at is understand ours and the other party's interests and needs, because that is where we can find more likely common ground. The advantage of this is that parties will be involved in the decision-making of this negotiation together, and thus can feel ownership, a buy-in, and improve the relationship between both parties, right? So how does this work in practice? There are positions, which is what I say I want, right? These are usually the public statements that we come out and say, for the sisters, I want the orange, right? For your program, it might be, I want more income time for my staff. I want them to have more time in which they can work together on this project. Position is what you say publicly to others. You then have an interest under that position, which is what you really want, right? So in the case of the sisters, we saw that what they really wanted was either the skin of the orange or the flesh in order to make juice. In a project, it could be that you actually want is for your team to feel safer because they have more time together, right? So interests refer to the underlying specific or practical outcomes we want. You can think about these as the hopes, desires, beliefs, fears, and values that lead you to state a position in your negotiation. Below these, we have the need. And needs are these general, basic, underlying human needs that can typically be shared by and understood by all parties. So the need for shelter, communication, food, these kinds of circumstances, right? So when you enter into negotiation, remember that you have a position, what I say I want, what the other person says they want, an interest, what they really want, what you really want, and a need, what you really need. Here, you will see an example. Take some time to read it amongst yourselves, and then 5 to 10 minutes where you and your group try to come up with 1 or 2 more examples. When you're done, come back, and I'll show you how to use this for negotiation. So, what examples did you come up with? Did you find specific position, interests, and needs? Now, let's see how you can use this according to principled negotiation in order to negotiate with another party. We overlap triangles. My triangle of position, interest, and need, and your triangle of position, interest, and need. Now, if our negotiation only occurs at the level of position, this only leads us to 2 possible outcomes. I win, you lose. You win, I lose, right? Because our positions don't overlap. If you've entered the negotiation process, it's because your positions are not coherent with each other or are not aligned with each other. But if we dig deeper, we look into what interests or what needs are driving this position that is being promoted, we might find a win-win situation within the zone of possible agreement. You see, because although our positions may be different, our interests may overlap. We need skills and abilities to be able to dig below that position, both in ourselves and in our counterparties, to find what those interests and needs are. So now I will describe your communication skills assignment. It might be the case that your educational program has changed how this works. So this might only be applicable to some of you, but afterwards I will describe the process which you go through in a negotiation. So bear with me, and you'll be back on track in a little bit. So what is this communication skill assignment about? You will be split into groups, 2 different groups, right? One of them will be a UNICEF aspect, and one of them will be the national government aspect. And you will both come together to negotiate a response to an emergency. You will be aware of each other's initial demands or positions, as they would be called, and then your job is to figure out how you will approach this negotiation and carry out this negotiation in practice in the near future. You will then receive feedback from your fellow classmates, from your lecturers, and create reflection assignments on how this went. This is the pinnacle of all the communication skills that we've been working on so far. So make sure you take the task on, invest, and receive, right? So how will you carry this on? In a negotiation, you can broadly differentiate it into 4 phases: the phase of analysis, strategy, negotiation, and follow-through. And these are what usually happens in each one of these stages. I will carry on now, but you're welcome to come back to look at these. So in the analysis phase, what is your task? Your task is to figure out the 2 triangles. What is your or your party's triangles, and what is the other party's triangle? This will give you a much better understanding to answer the following questions. What are you willing to compromise from your position, from what you have hold of? What is the absolute minimum that you need before the negotiation ends? Usually this is summarized in the sentence, what is your bottom line? What is the absolute minimum you are willing to obtain or maximum you are willing to give before you get up off that table and leave the negotiation? You need to figure this out for yourself and imagine it for the other party. Think creatively, what is the other party's bottom line? This is your initial analysis. Once you have those bottom lines defined, you then move into the strategy, where you try and brainstorm options that will land you in that zone of possible agreement. What kind of propositions, what kind of negotiation approaches, what kind of arguments do you need to provide, do you need to guide the discussion with in order to arrive into that zone of common interests? Now, when you actually go into the negotiation, you'll see that there's some tips here which relate quite clearly to the topics we've discussed in leadership so far. One of the key things about this, though, that I would like to highlight is the established use of a feedback cycle. You have planned, you have brainstormed, but sometimes, a lot of the times in reality, things change in course. It's important that you use the feedback cycle, the feedback loops, to make sure that you understand where the discussion is going, and you can either rethink your approach or redirect the discussion towards your approach, right? So keep in mind these tips when you negotiate, when you go through the process. When you actually finish this negotiation, here's some things that you need to keep in mind as well. Make sure you document these decisions. Everything that's spoken remains in the air. So if you manage to come to an agreement with your other party during this assignment, put it in writing. Figure out how you're going to monitor the agreements that you've come to. If you've agreed to something, be accountable. Having gone through this whole process and then not meeting your end of the deal is detrimental and can damage your relationship with the other party permanently. And particularly for this, make sure you complete your assignment. Make sure you get through to the negotiation phase. Here are your key takeaway points for this. Make sure you take some time to look at them. I'd like to thank you once again for joining me in this lecture. I hope you find it useful, and I wish you success and a lot of learning when you take on this communication assignment of negotiating. All the best, and I look forward to seeing you in the near future.